Welcome, everybody. Um, can't believe this is our penultimate time together for this series. Before we can't really speak about women's Talmud and Rabbi Soloveitchik unless we also speak about Sarah Schneer and what is truly a Beis Yaakov revolution. Um, not because they're necessarily intellectually connected, but both have to grapple with the optics of Orthodox Jewish life and also buy-in from other rabbinic authorities. Here is a retelling of the origin story of Beis Yaakov, 1917, by Rabbi Hanoch Teller. In his This is from his volume called Builders, which is a series of essays about formative figures in modern Orthodox Jewish history. Having obtained the blessings of such prominent Gedolim, Sarah Schneer was ready to begin her work. She gathered some neighbors, all very religious ladies, who surely would back her project. But as she began to outline the plan, explaining the details with great passion, the women began to titter. Such ideas, they protested, were mere fantasies. She should not waste her time with such foolishness. Uh, Continuing on, explains Hanoch Teller that it wasn't until she received the approbation of the Chavetz Chaim, Rabbi Israel Meir HaKohen, was it that she was able to convince very cautious, even cynical people that her movement in support of girls' education could really flourish. The problem, the problem was that Sarah Schneer founded Beit Yaakov directly after World War I. The letter that Hanoch Teller publishes in the page preceding this passage uh, was dated, and we'll see exactly where it came from. Uh, Chaf Gimel, the 23rd day of Shvat, Tuf Reish Tzadi Gimel. So the trick is to add 1240 to those dates. And when you add Tuf Reish Tzadi Gimel to 1240, the year becomes 1933. Well, Beis Yaakov had already been founded about 15 years prior. So what do we make of that? Sarah Schneer, apparently in her own memoir, not in her memoir, apparently, um, was already quite confident in her initiative to start Beis Yaakov. La'achar Sharayon, after she came up with the idea of it, Misad Beit Sefer Charedi Levanot, after she decided that she was going to build a day school for young women, Nitzmad Ki Mibli Laharfot, Nisati Benidun Zaimachi, she boasted and confided uh, in the project with her brother, who was a dutiful Belzer Chassid. She'd go there as so, and it continues on. We have a lot to cover, but he insisted that he escort her to the Belzer Rebbe, and if you look a little bit further, she records her memory. This was published decades later. He uh, Brother and sister appear before the Belzer Rebbe, and in the third to last line, he explains the business in a letter. Katav Petek El Harav. Uh, Sarah Schneer's brother turns over a letter, small, short letter that she wrote to the Belzer Rebbe, that he wrote to the Belzer Rebbe. He wrote to Lahadrich L'chanech et Banot Yisrael b'derech Yahadut b'haTorah. Her purpose, explains brother about the sisters project, is to guide, is to educate young girls in the proper ways of Judaism and Torah. As Shamati Mipiv Akadosh. Then we heard from the holy mouth of the Belz Rebbe, Shaharav et Hamilim, uttered the following words: Bracha v'hatzlacha. You should be blessed and you should be successful. And that was it. That was the only actual approbation that Sarah Schneer records. Now, the Chavetz Chaim was in support of girls' education, and there is an edition of his Likutei Halachot that appears in 1918, but actually, the earliest version of his commentary on Masechet Sota, in which there is a discussion about the worthwhileness of girls' Torah study. It's not very particularly glorifying. And the Chavetz Chaim, though, takes issues with it because he thinks that the situation has changed. That appears in 1911, meaning that the Chavetz Chaim's actual first known support for increased girls' Jewish education appears in 1911. Perhaps the confluence was because the one of the earliest extant versions we had for a long, long time was the 1918, which would have been in sync with the emergence of Beis Yaakov. The Nira de Kol Zed Davka of this Manim Shalafaninu, referring to this passage about Rabbi Eliezer and whether calling girls Torah education tiflot, whatever that means. Shekol echad haya dar b'makam avotenu b'kabbalat ha'avot haya chazak ma'od. Said that Rabbi Eliezer's comment that girls Torah study is only eno ela tiflot, that it's something frivolousness, I guess is a safe way to translate it. It's a kol echad be'echad linaeg b'derech shedarko abutav. Ukema'amar katuv sha'al avicha v'yigad b'zeh. Hainu Yecholim Lomar Shlo Tamatara V'Tismak Banhaga Alavatara Hayasharim Aval K'eight. Let me translate for a moment. That all this is in play when a term that Chaim Soloveitchik introduced to our Jewish lexicon, when there was a mimetic tradition, when young girls and boys, for that matter, learned how to do Judaism from their homes. About K'eight, Bavanas Harabim, because of the modern sensibilities in the time that we're in now. Shekibata Abot, Rofef Ma'od Ma'od V'gam, Matzoi Shenu Dar B'makam Avotenu Klal Uprat. Because we're moving all over, we're no longer situated in Hamish, I guess is what he might say, environments. Therefore, we have to up our game in Torah study for young women. Bevadai mitzvah rabba lamdam in the fourth to last line over here. It is a tremendous requirement. Mitzvah rabba lilamdam chumash v'gam neviim b'ktuvim Mosrei Chazal, teach them some passages from Chazal, Kigon Mesachet Avot, teach them Perkei Avot, B'Sefer Menorah Hamaor, and teach them some sort of a Gada commentary or Kedoma. Kidei sheet emet etzlam, so you should impress the truth to them of our faith, Akadosha, of our holy faith, Dim Lav Hachi, because we don't do this, Al Sheyasuru Gamre Midarach Hashem, Yavru, Al Kol Yisodei Hadat Chas V'Shalom. There was much fear that girls, because there wasn't any advanced Jewish education for them, were going to colleges, were going to other places, and they were converting, frankly, or assimilating to the broader European culture. And so the Chavetz Chaim thought that there was reason to modify the wisdom of girls' education. That appears in 1911, way before Sarah Schneer had been exposed during World War I, 1914 to 1917, when she was exiled, when she was exposed to the girls' education deployed by Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch. It preceded it. Chavetz Chaim didn't get involved that time. In fact, among the 1920s, the earliest supporters all published, they were very dutiful about this, in the Beis Yaakov Bulletin and Journal from 1925 to 1934. The Bayaner Rebbe offers support, Rav Chanan Wasserman offers support, the Ger Rebbe offers support, Rabbi Chaim Ozer offers his support, and then the sixth Lubavitch Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, as well. So rabbinic approbation was clearly important to the emergence of the Beis Yaakov movement, and they understood that it lent a degree of authenticity to a revolutionary idea in Jewish education. But it wasn't what set off the movement. Again, even the Belzer Rebbe's approbation, people didn't know about it until many, many decades later. It was only for her own brother's peace of mind, maybe hers as well, Sarah Schneer's that is. She was ready to go about it on her own. Once the Agudas Yisrael gets involved, once the once a rabbinic committee gets involved in the early 1920s, 1923, I believe, is it when the Beis Yaakov movement starts to conscript support from rabbinic authorities. Now, what about that? What about that 1933 letter of support from the Chavetz Chaim? Well, that comes about because of the following. We don't have the original, to my knowledge, but in an interesting volume called The Torah World, we do have a letter, or the reprinting of a letter from Sarah Schneer to one of her disciples, Chasni Ross. You are right. If the local rabbi will not support you, you will not make it. Most interesting, we had the same trouble with his brother in another city. So as they're promulgating and they're starting, like Johnny Appleseed almost, to spread the Beis Yaakov movement, either in the form of formal day schools, as teaching seminaries, or very often after school programs. Many of the Beis Yaakov programs do not have the infrastructure that we think of today. Many were after school programs. He too. So there are people who opposed it. And when she receives the letter from one of her disciples, Sarshir says, yeah, I know that guy. His brother was a menace too. He too opposed our school. The Aguda wrote to the Chavetz Chaim, and his reply will soon be published in our magazine, number 106. In that city, we lost 70 girls. To the other schools, meaning non-Jewish schools, we were too late. So in 1933, she notes, and she's coordinating with the Aguda, that there are these troublemaker rabbis along the hinterland. Chasni Ross was actually charged. She made aliyah with her husband. And so Sarah Schneer said, good. So take the long way to Israel. And in the meantime, use that, we'll fund it, start to plant the seeds for our Beis Yaakov movement as you migrate and make aliyah. And that is what exactly happens, is that the Chavetz Chaim in 1933 in the Beis Yaakov Journal, 1933, not 1917, writes a letter in support of the Beis Yaakov movement, repeating much of his sentiments from, again, 1911, when there was no such thing as the Beis Yaakov movement. That is a model, as sort of a point of inquiry about the need for rabbinic authority. Let's fast forward to High Lie is the Hebrew Institute of Long Island, now known as HAFTR, in which one of its leaders, Rabbi Leonard Rosenfeld, wrote a letter to Rabbi Soloveitchik, Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik, in May 1953. This is included in the Otzer Harav series that was edited by Rabbi Natty Helfgott. And Rabbi Soloveitchik replied to the question from Leonard Rosenfeld about the worthwhileness of introducing Talmud education to girls at High Lie. High Lie was founded in 1937, so this was some 16 years later. Dear Rabbi Rosenfeld, writes Rabbi Soloveitchik, please accept my apologies for not answering your letters sooner. The delay was due to my overcrowded schedule. So at the time, Rabbi Soloveitchik was essentially at the height of his powers, was a major force by now at Yeshiva University, where he had taught now full time for about 10 years. He was the leader of the Mizrahi movement. He was very involved in Rabbinical Council of America business, and of course, still had a relatively young family in Boston. As to your question with regard to the curriculum in a coeducational school, I expressed my opinion to you long ago that it would be a very regrettable oversight on our part if we were to arrange separate Hebrew courses for girls. So you have a co-ed school. Should you divide the curriculum and do something different for girls than for boys? Not only is the teaching of Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral tradition, Mishnah and Gemara, to girls permissible, but it is nowadays an absolute imperative. This policy of discrimination, interesting, in 1953, discrimination has a very, very specific connotation. The policy of discrimination between the sexes as to subject matter and method of instruction, which is still advocated by certain groups within our Orthodox community, has contributed greatly to the deterioration and downfall of traditional Judaism. Boys and girls alike should be introduced into the inner halls of Torah Sheba'al Peh. I hope to prepare in the near future a halachic brief, a tshuva, on the problem, which will exhaust the various aspects of the same. In the meantime, I heartily endorse a uniform program for the entire student body with kindest personal regards. I remain sincerely yours, Joseph Soloveitchik. Unfortunately, Rabbi Soloveitchik uh, did not author, or we do not have available to us a responsum, a halachic guidance on women's Torah study, although there's certainly archival evidence, and we'll review a lot of that together today. Um, but you can, and well known at the time, Rabbi Leonard Rosenfeld knew that Rabbi Soloveitchik had introduced Gemara study for girls at his Maimonides school, which was founded the same year as High 1937. So what happened? Um, Rabbi Manu Rackman, who at the time lived in Far Rockaway and was involved at High unconnected in 1984, at the time in which Rabbi Soloveitchik was still active. He wouldn't retire until 1985. He wrote the following in his weekly column in the Jewish Week. I'm very grateful to my friend Menachem Butler for uh, furnishing a copy of this article. Many years ago, when I served the Far Rockaway Jewish community, the Board of Education, so this is written 30 years after the fact, the Board of Education of its major day school, but way before the Health God volume appeared. So many years ago, I'll start over. When I served the Far Rockaway Jewish community, the Board of Education and its major day school debated the issue whether girls were to be taught the same curriculum as boys. This is the same issue that Rabbi Soloveitchik weighed in on. It was then well known that two opposing views were entertained, one by Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, we reviewed that together, and the other by Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. The board, by a vote of 9-6, simply decided to send the issue to Soloveitchik. So that dispatched Lenny Rosenfeld to query Rabbi Soloveitchik, to query the Rebbe, whose answer was known to be in the affirmative, and it was really unnecessary to submit the issue to him. But the principal of the school thought it was forbidden to teach the girls Talmud, and he invalidated the board's decision. So he didn't strike up Rabbi Soloveitchik's position. I don't know if that's the reason why he didn't actually author that brief when he said he would. So there was a lot of pressure against offering girls Talmud education. In an article in the Agudas Yisrael's Jewish Observer, "How Good Is Your Day School?" By a nom de plume, S. Joseph. We don't really know who that is. They offer, funny as it is, in that article, a checklist to decide what type of school your children attend. About the schedule, religious studies are offered in the morning, yes or no. That was a big deal. That Torah studies should begin in the morning. Particularly Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky of Torah Vodaas is a champion of that. There are regular sessions on public religious holidays. Hebrew classes are not canceled during general studies examinations, regions. There are 17 hours of Hebrew studies, at least overseas. So these are all the checklists of what makes a fine Jewish day school according to the Aguda, staff standards, educational approach. But I want to zero in on the curriculum for a moment. So this is the part of the checklist. No use is made of abbreviated chumashim or other Hebrew textbooks contrary to halacha. Yes, not using maybe some editions from from unwanted presses. I don't know. The course of studies proceeds directly from Aleph Beis through Sidor to Chumash, latest by second grade, and then third, the boys' curriculum leads to and emphasizes Gemara, and the girls' curriculum excludes it. Doesn't say what the girls' curriculum ought to focus on, but it excludes Gemara study. So this was very much a live issue when this appears in the 60s and 70s. Take a look here. This is a letter submitted from Rabbi Haskell Lookstein, then associate principal of Ramaz in 1968, to the parent body of that well-heeled day school on the Upper East Side. Dear parents, Ramaz High School conducts, also founded in 1937, 1937 was a good year for modern Orthodox day schools. Ramaz High School conducts an honors program in Talmud for selected qualified students who are both deserving of participating in such a program and interested in it. I am happy to inform you that your child has been selected, so it didn't go to just any parent, for the honors program. It will meet on Thursday evening from 5 to 6 under the direction of Rabbi Julius Parnas. That would be Rabbi Yehuda Parnas, Rosh Yeshiva, then at Yeshiva University, a celebrated Rosh Yeshiva at Yeshiva University. Eventually, in 1999, he would leave with Rabbi Abba Bronspiegel to become the co-Rosh Yeshiva at Lander College for Men at Torah University, Torah College at the time. The class will be held in room 606. Sessions will begin on Thursday, October 24th, and will run according to the schedule on the attached memo. May I convey to you my heartiest congratulations on your child's selection for this program. I know that he or she will benefit from it and that it will serve as further inspiration for future academic success. Very cordially yours, Rabbi Haskell Lookstein, Associate Principal. P.S. Please fill out your child's name in an enclosed card, sign and have your child presented to his or her Talmud teacher on Monday, October 21st. Ramaz was a co-ed school, boys and girls. I hereby request that my son/or daughter be registered for the Talmud Honors Program taught by Rabbi Yehuda Parnas. Another collector's item around the same time in 1966. This is from the notes, handwritten notes of Rabbi Gerson Appel, was a very important rabbinic figure and writer at the time. May 1966, he was a teacher at the not so new anymore Stern College for Women in 1966. If you take a look, pretty legible handwriting. Rabbi Soloveitchik strongly, let me make it a little bit bigger. Strongly
Favored.
thank you, favored giving the girls, young women, a class in Gemara as an elective. So they were at Stern College. Rabbi Soloveitchik was asked whether or not to introduce Talmud to the curriculum as an elective at Stern College, and he answered in the affirmative, as was his wont. Thanks for the help on that. By 1977, Stern College had already been around for some 20 years. It was founded in 1954. And in the Stern Observer, the weekly newspaper, there was much ado. There was a new president, Rabbi Norman Lamb. There was a new administration led by, she's actually just retired, Dean Karen Bacon, who was past valedictorian at Stern College and a biologist. A question of ethics at a Torah institution such as Stern College, the editorial writes in 1977, where honesty and ethicality, not sure if that's a word, are considered fundamental values of the system, one would expect its members to act accordingly and uphold these values. Thus, it is with disbelief and remorse that we make mention of the use of slugs in the food machines. It does not seem credible that someone within Stern College would employ means such as stealing to obtain food, an illegal act which, aside, should be for, reflecting poorly on the individual involved, reflects Stern as a whole in an unfavorable light. Furthermore, it is a type of action which initiates food prices. Inflates, food prices, and goes on talking about Torah Judaism, and in the same op-ed about counterfeiting and gaming the system in the soda machines and the food vending machines. The editor-in-chief, Debbie Silver, when opportunity knocks, about the same Torah institution, also understands that things are happening. There's a presidential planning commission led by newly appointed president about a year prior to this, President Norman Lamb. The Presidential Planning Commission, PPC's observations concerning the status of the Judaic Studies program at Stern College found a dire need for expansion within the department. Thus, necessity became the mother of invention. As a result of the extensive evaluation of the PPC, new and innovative changes have been introduced to extend the boundaries and disintegrate some of the limitations. The new Judaic Studies proposal as formulated by Rabbi Saul Berman and Dean Jacob Rabinowitz, goes on to indicate what's at stake and what's on tap. There's another Dean, Chaim Soloveitchik of Rebel Graduate School, he was dean at the time, recognizes the necessity for intensive Jewish learning to be open to young women on a college level. It is a daring venture, for it opens new options to women that have never before been approached by normative halakha. The proposal is commendable in every respect, and the general reaction among the student body, we'll see if that lasts, has been a mixture of surprise and delight. And an interview in Hamavaser, which is one of the student publications of Yeshiva College, also 1977, interview with Dean Rabinowitz, Rabbi Berman, and myself planned and brought into being a program at Stern that opens up opportunities in Talmudic studies and concentrates on Judaic studies. And in October 1977, this brochure is produced. You see here is Rabbi Norman Lamb, here is Rabbi Saul Berman, and here is Rabbi Soloveitchik. Apparently he liked to drink 7-Up, delivering the inaugural Talmud lecture at Stern College's Beit Midrash. The brochure offers the following: a new beginning. Even though Stern had courses in Talmud preceding that as early as the 1960s, a new beginning, a new era in Jewish education for women began in October 1977 when Stern College for Women inaugurated its Beit Midrash program. As an innovator in women's education, Stern College has always been sensitive to the desires of young women of all backgrounds to actively participate in Judaism's tradition of learning. As an integral part of Yeshiva University, it has pioneered the advancement of college-level Jewish studies. Now, as educational opportunities for women are rapidly expanding, Stern College, the nation's only institution of higher education for women under Jewish auspices, has developed a setting and structure for learning that has been unavailable to women until the present. Course of study. Well, the study of Talmud has long been an option in its course offerings. With the initiation of the Beit Midrash program, Stern College for Women has revitalized its Judaic studies curricula. The Beit Midrash program is unique in several ways. It changes the intensity and format of women's learning through its use, of the traditional combination of shiurim, lectures, and its individualized group method of study, chavrusa. The classes in Bible, Talmud, and Halacha are available on 3 levels. Goes on to discuss the wider curriculum. And there's a lot of excitement, rightfully so. And Rabbi Soloveitchik himself delivers the inaugural lecture. The director of public relations at Yeshiva University, Sam Hartstein, writes a memo on that day as follows: I was present at the shiur given by Rabbi Soloveitchik at last night's commencement of the Beit Midrash. The session was attended by the intermediate and advanced level students, approximately. So apparently there's a question. He says 50 women. I think it was closer to 60 or 70. Dr. Lamb, Dr. Bacon, Rabbi Berman. This is a sad, important point. Is Baruch Lanner, Rabbi Lanner gave the class moving forward, and Rabbi Mordechai Willig were also present. Rabbi Soloveitchik spoke for an hour on the first Mishnah in Tractate Pesachim. I don't think so. I think he actually discussed Arvei Pesachim. He discussed the end about the Seder, which is what the women will be learning. He concluded the session with a discussion of the importance of traditional learning and the oral tradition in general, and of the importance of study for women in particular. Esther has some good quotes for a news release. While you report, we spoke briefly with Rabbi Berman and students, and the response for the program was very enthusiastic. Rabbi Saul Berman provided a memoir that was published on Lair House a number of years ago of his memory of this as well, and is altogether very optimistic about the future of women's Talmud study. The Allgemeine Journal, in the right-wing Yiddish press, publishes, you see, let me show you again. At the same time, they offer the picture front and center, top of the fold at that time. Stern College, the Mädelsche Heichschule, Fun Yeshiva University, the girls' college, Mädel. So they don't. That already tells you sort of what their position on Stern College was. And in the quotations, they open a Beit Midrash uh, for Freuen, for women. Um, they don't get into the issue one way or the other, is it negative or positive. They publish much of the press release. This is just translating into Yiddish, but there are certain connotations about the heft and the depth of the Beit Midrash program, calling it for girls, for Mädelach, certainly. According to I mentioned before, Rabbi Berman, Rabbi Saul Berman, who was there and was one of the administrative leaders of the women's Talmud movement. That's what it was, a movement at Stern College in '77, as was Dr. Chaim Soloveitchik, supporting his father very much. Um, Rabbi Berman, we don't have, other than him, there's no reason to doubt him. Other than we don't have much evidence of it. But one of the detractors from the yeshiva world was Rabbi Yitzchak Kuttner, the Rosh Yeshiva of Chaim Berlin. It's not surprising, but we don't have anything in, say, all of Pachad Yitzchak, which is his notes on various theological, religious, cultural, amazing Torah, certainly. It's over there on my bookcase on my left. He was a very complicated figure, was Rav Hutner, certainly. But to my knowledge, when I looked high and low, he didn't weigh in on the worthwhileness of women's Talmud study. But we do have from his successor and one of his leading students, who just passed away not too long ago, Rabbi Aaron Schechter. At the time, William Helmreich was preparing a pioneering volume on what he described as the yeshiva world, the anthropology of it. He recorded transcripts of his interviews with leading Roshei Yeshiva, with leading figures in the Orthodox yeshiva world, particularly in the United States, and he donated those transcripts to the Yeshiva University archives. So he pretty much asked the same questions of everyone he interviewed. And he asks WH's William Helmreich, what do you feel are the greatest problems facing Orthodoxy today? Okay. A very worthwhile question to ask. Rabbi Aaron Schechter, AS, very long pause, about 5 minutes. So you can imagine the scene as this academic from City College, New York, asked this very broad facing question. And Rabbi Aaron Schechter takes a few minutes to think, deliberate internally before he offers a response. The lack of maturity in leadership, the mature intelligence embodied in Torah has not yet developed. It's a young group in age and in concept. That leadership represented by European thinking. I noticed you said you were born in Europe, and I'll tell you that even though you left as a small baby, Helmreich, who also passed away sadly, way too young during COVID, you left as a small baby, it's still very good that you are from there. There's something about the way the group from Europe brought over with them certain ideas and values. You're born in Europe, you have an advantage, according to Rabbi Aaron Schechter. You become Rosh Yeshiva of Chaim Berlin in due time. I find myself thinking about how this man was born and raised here, but expressed such a strong preference for the European generation. And suddenly I take note of his dress. This is Helmreich's edit, his own thinking for the European generation. And suddenly I take note of his dress, which is indeed very European in style. I realize he venerates the past. Going back to Rabbi Schechter's voice, this lack of leadership shows up everywhere. There are religious modernists who are rightists in their own camp. And what do these rightists say? They establish, this interview was taken just a year after it was established. They establish a young women's Beit Midrash. I mean, are we crazy? That was the attitude of the yeshiva world. But they didn't truly act very deeply. And much of it, according to Rabbi Berman, and no reason to doubt, is because of the towering stature of Rabbi Soloveitchik. It was important that he lead the way, that he deliver the inaugural Talmud lecture at Stern College. Um, Part of the reason for the misgivings had nothing to do with the appropriateness of Talmud study for women in Orthodoxy, but because of broader changes in the American Jewish landscape. Rabbi Harold Schulweis was on the left flank of the conservative movement, authors a volume in, an essay, excuse me, an article in the Journal of Reform Judaism called Rabbi Wanted, No Women Need Apply. Uh, this is already in the mid 80s when this is fall 1983 when the reform movement had already ordained its first rabbi at Hebrew Union College in the early 1970s, 1972, Rabbi Sally Friesen. And just in a year, the Jewish Theological Seminary would, its faculty would vote to finally ordain women, beginning with Rabbi Amy Alberg in 1984 and 1985. So this is very much in the discussion in 1983. Noteworthy and in this article about how, yes, the reform movement is ordaining women, but they're not getting jobs. Noteworthy and admirable is the decision of the Orthodox Stern College for Women in New York to introduce intensive courses in Talmudic studies for women, a course of studies introduced by none other than Rabbi J.B. Joseph B. Soloveitchik, who offered its introductory Talmud shir. And all this from Orthodox leaders and contrary to the judgment of Rabbi Eliezer, the Rambam, in quoting all of those commentaries in the Gemara and Sota. Now, there was certainly excitement in the early goings in the late 1970s for the Stern Beit Midrash program, but by the mid 1980s, things had really changed. Perhaps just a lack of an infrastructure, changes in faculty, or maybe the very real scare that somehow Orthodox Judaism's and modern Orthodoxy's decision to introduce at a high level Talmud study for women was somehow part of the slippery slope that would eventually lead to women's rabbinic ordination. Yeah, just reporting the news very late. By 1979, writes Aviva Gantrow in the pages of Hamavaser, a Stern College student at the time, 1985, but reflecting on 1979, however, with the introduction of the core program, that's the Gen Ed curriculum at Stern College, which strengthened the Judaic Studies department, the students became more interested in concentrating their learning in Tanakh, and other areas of the Beit Midrash eventually dissolved. And there's other evidence as well. It wouldn't be really until the late 1990s when, under the direction in his final years as president, Rabbi Norman Lamb would reinvigorate Stern Talmud at Stern College with the GPATS program, and that was really on the graduate level. But certainly the continuity was still very much there. The question of how modern Orthodoxy has taken that baton from Rabbi Soloveitchik, who would retire from teaching at yeshiva in December 1985, was a sinuous path. It was complicated, but certainly that story isn't yet finished and has much to do. I think we'll all agree with the advancement of Talmud study in Israel, led by leaders certainly uh, certainly Malki Bina comes to mind, and others at Nishmat and at Matan and others at what was called Bruriah College, I believe, in the 1970s and 80s. It's really that Israeli folkway of strong women-oriented advanced Torah, including Talmud study, that eventually comes to America in the late 20th century that has much to do with the success, I think the success of women's Talmud study for Orthodox Judaism in the United States. And that really helped along a legacy that Rabbi Soloveitchik really was a pioneer, but sometimes was alone, really didn't have much of the support. And there were gaps along the way, even after his 1977 lecture. But it's something that, especially when you contextualize in the history of Beis Yaakov, you see that the optics, much more than the pedagogical worthwhileness, the optics the Orthodox optics of Talmud study for women are just as important, perhaps, as everything else. Okay. Um, so I see we have a number of questions. I saw them come in, but I was warned earlier on not to take questions until the very end. So some people weigh in absolutely. And I have it in my, this is a lot of this is drawn from my chapter in my Authentically Orthodox. And I look at the curriculum innovations at Yeshiva, at Central, which is Yeshiva University High School for Girls, at Shulamith, at Frisch, at Flatbush, Yeshiva Flatbush, for example. And there are, it's fits and starts. Frisch, for example, which is led by strong students of Rabbi Soloveitchik, was adamant about Talmud study for women. Yeshiva University High School for Girls offered Gemara, but not as many periods, certainly, as what they offered for the boys. Shulamith in Brooklyn offered a pared down curriculum, and Flatbush due both to sensitivities among the faculty, but also of interest to the students, eventually did away with one of the periods of advanced Talmud study and instead issued a new elective in home economics. Right. And people are confirming uh, those ideas or those facts. I don't think, but you would have to check regarding Turo College's offerings. I'm not familiar. That was a question Joyce had asked. So Mark asks a really important question. Since when has learning been defined as study of Talmud exclusively or close to it in the Orthodox Haredi community? Right. So that's a really interesting question. Why are we so Talmud focused? What about Rabbeinu Bechaya? What about Chumash? What about medieval Jewish poetry? How did we get so Talmud focused? Um, that's a really interesting question. That is part of those cultural folkways, which, in my opinion, migrate from Europe to the United States. I wrote a two-part article in Tradition a number of years ago of the, I won't call it failure, but the challenges of Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch of the Hirschian movement to successfully migrate to the United States. Hirsch was not a Talmud-focused curriculum. His Torim Derech Eretz was not focused on, to the contrary. Many of his disciples focused on his own Chumash commentary, which he wrote at the end of his lifetime. His Yeshurun, his monthly magazine, focused on Jewish philosophy, Jewish thought. Um, part of the reason, Part of the reason has to do with Hirsch was a non, if not anti-Zionist, and also preached separatism from Reform and Conservative, and so that was a non-starter for many in the Orthodox world at the time. But a lot of that had to do with the fact that the Eastern European folkway, which privileged Talmud study, you were not an authentic Talmud Chacham unless you knew Shas. It actually happened. Is Not in the 90s, a Hebrew volume of Samson Raphael's Shiles and Chuvas was published. They're not Shiles and Chuvas. They're his German language ideas, sometimes halachic ideas, translated from German into rabbinic Hebrew by a great grandson that makes him look like a Rosh Hashiva. So it even happened to Hirsch in his lifetime. The focus on Talmud at the expense of other areas is very much part of the modern yeshiva movement in Lithuania and the success of that folkway to dominate Orthodox education in the decades surrounding the turn of the 20th century. Uh, I think it's squarely that. Whether that's a good idea or a bad idea, leave to other people to decide. Yeshiva Rabbi Moshe Soloveitchik, right, was also integrated in Talmud studies. That's right. So I'm glad, right? Everybody is chiming in with their own experiences. It's very lovely about their experience in the 50s and 60s because it was a burgeoning movement at the time. and not a consistent one at that. Um, why do men ignore the Tanakh curriculum? I don't know. I don't know. With my daughter at her bar mitzvah, we finished Shas Mishnayot. She and I together made a siyum at her bar mitzvah. My son, he and I are learning a Tanakh together. We just finished Sefer Shemot. It basically takes 3 years to do it, both. Um, and so we're going through that. So hopefully, we'll get to it very, very soon. Why do they? I think there's only so much time in the day, and again, it's that masculine intellectualism of Talmud, and it's frankly a shame. We should be our education, our curriculum should be full. We should. You need the Torah Shebechtav, you need the Torah Sheba'al Peh. See, last week I think I gave a an overly political answer to a dicey question. This one I'm a little more emboldened. And then, of course, at Maimonides school, Samuel Frank offers that, of course, the curriculum was dominated by Gemara study for boys and for girls. Okay, so you don't have to believe me. There's evidence in the chat. All right. Well, everybody, uh, you can take a markup on his offer. All right. So next week, is the last one. Same bad time, same bad channel. We're going to end with some levity to look at some of the consumerism, materialism in Jewish education culture. We're going to look at bracha bees, gedolim cards, and maybe some kosher Lego, and what that means for American Orthodoxy in the last couple of decades. Everybody, have a great day and Purim Sameach.